Approaching Gaur Purnima. This is actually the first time in 15 years that I have not been in Navadvip in India for the Gaur Purnima festival. since 2005. I've always been there. So it's a big change for me. And for our, sorry, what is your name again? Our friend in Sweden, I forgot.
It's Emil.
Emil, okay. So Gaur Purnima, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it marks the appearance day, the birthday of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And for us, it's like it's our new year. It's the start of our Gaudiya Vaishnava calendar. So it's kind of like the center of our year. And it's always been the biggest festival in our mission. And particularly devotees would congregate at our central headquarters in West Bengal, India. And it would be a week-long festival, 7-day festival. And also in this period, in like a month, 6 weeks leading up to the appearance of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, we see there are, many of the eternal associates of Sri Chaitanya Dev are also taking place. Their appearance days. They're coming to participate in the divine Leela of Mahaprabhu. So, like Advaita Charja's appearance day, his Avirbhav, Vishnu Priya Devi, Nityananda Prabhu, and there are several others also. And also this past Thursday, a few days ago, we celebrated the divine appearance day of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He is sometimes described as a non-different manifestation of Sriman Mahaprabhu. There's one very beautiful. So Srila Saraswati Thakur, if our friend is not familiar, he is like the great revolutionary in modern times who established the practice of Krishna consciousness for the modern age. And so he's a very, very important, very central figure for us. He was active in his preaching mission in the first half of the 20th century, like around the 1920s, 30s. His mission was very active in India, and he established 64 temples within India. And he also started the movement of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya into the Western world. He sent preachers to London, to Germany. And he started alone, but he developed a very strong preaching mission. But what I was coming to say, there's one verse that our grandfather Guru Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote, praising Srila Saraswati Thakur. So Saraswati Thakur is like our great grandfather, we could say. Our guru's guru. So our grandfather guru, our guru's guru, Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And then Saraswati Thakur is our guru's guru. So there's one verse which I'm thinking of in particular, where Srila Sridhar Maharaj is comparing Saraswati Thakur to Mahaprabhu. Gauravad Vigraham Vande Gaurangam. How does it go? Gauravad Vigraham Vande Gaurangam Gauravaibhavam Gaura Sankirtanunmatam. I can't remember the last part, but he describes there. It's at the beginning of Prapana Jivanamrita, a very beautiful book of ours. He describes Saraswati Thakur as the embodiment of the divine message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gauravaga Gaurangam. He is the non-different expansion non-different divine form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gauravad Vigraham Vani Gaurangam Gaur Vaibhav. And the word Vaibhav, it can mean wealth, or it can also mean extension. So he is the wealth of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is the extension of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaura Sankirtanonmatam, very beautiful phrase that he is intoxicated in the divine Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We are so indebted. You know, I was thinking we had a nice meeting here for that day, and I was thinking, you know, what Saraswati Thakur did, you know, the grandeur of his preaching movements, the import of what he gave and what he did is so great that we could all spend our lives, you know, just to try to do justice to what he did. You know, so he came at a very troubled time, we can say, for the followers of Lord Chaitanya. He appeared at a very troubled time within the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because there was so much corruption. As we see in any religious society, you know, corruption is always very prone to enter, because we are human after all. So, you know, in the 500 years after Lord Chaitanya Dev was here, there were like ups and downs, you could say, in terms of the purity of the representation of Lord Chaitanya's preaching and teachings. And at the period when Srila Saraswati Thakur appeared, there was a low point, we could say. There was so much corruption, misrepresentation, exploitation. You know, for example, you know, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came with the holy name. That was his main mission, to spread the glories and the practice of the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. You know, as the be all and end all, as the highest practice, the highest means by which we can realize our true natures as eternal servants of Krishna. You know, Mahaprabhu came with this you know, very, very wonderful and dignified opportunity for all. However, you know, in the period that Saraswati Thakur came, there was a lot of misunderstanding about this, and you know, there was the understanding that the holy name is everything, but the idea that one has to chant in a particular consciousness, that one has to chant, you know, not just vibrating the sound vibration with our tongues, but there also has to be some purification of heart. You know, one's lifestyle must support such chanting. The holy name of Krishna, it is not a material vibration, actually with our tongues we cannot vibrate the holy name. You know, the real holy name is something that will descend from above, and it will move us, and it will cause us to chant. And so one of our main duties as practitioners in the line of pure devotion is to, and this is something our Gurudev Srila Govindamar should emphasize, is that we have to make ourselves proper receivers. This is a major part of our life of devotion. Yes, trying to do this, doing this and doing that, practicing this, practicing that. That's on the surface, of course, and that should also support our overall, you know, life of devotion. But internally, the crucial thing is that we want to develop the mood. We want to develop the proper mood. We want to develop the proper heart, so that we can receive, you know, what will descend from above. So this is something that was not understood. And like for example, our Gurudev mentioned there would be people who would have marijuana smoking parties, and they would sit around chanting the name, and thinking that they're so great, and also one of the things about the nature of the practice of bhakti is that there's emphasis on the heart transaction, right? And so in the name of, there's a simplicity in Vaishnavism, there's a simplicity in the practice of bhakti, which can be exploited, in the name of simplicity and love, one can do anything and everything and say, oh, it's all about love and peace, like I can do whatever I want. In other words, no type of regulated practice, no recognition of our own fallibilities, no recognition of our own inadequacies, of our own impurities, no recognition of the need to purify our hearts. We are inviting the noble lady of devotion into our hearts. We have to clean up a little bit. So, there was a lot of mixing of, sensory, sense pleasure and the practice, so-called practice of devotion. And there was a spectrum. There was a spectrum. There's, at the extreme end, there would be, gross, dark tantric activities. And then on the lighter end of the spectrum would be persons who were practicing in maybe practicing properly, but in an external manner, without consciousness of the real need for inner heart development. Persons who would very strictly follow many strict, difficult austerities, imitating the Goswamis of Vrindavan, who lived very simple lives, living under trees, drinking buttermilk, etc., etc. There would be persons who would imitate such lifestyle, but were culturing an envious mentality, let's say. So there was a whole spectrum of persons who were deviating from the real line of Lord Chaitanya Dev. There was one person who identified 13 specific groups, 13 specific groups who were in their own particular way, holding the banner of Lord Chaitanya, but in their own way were actually misrepresenting the real teachings and the real message of what Lord Chaitanya Dev came to give. There were also people who made a business out of, and of course, these are all things that still go on today. But the point is that there was a need for like nowadays these things all go on, but we feel blessed because we've come to a proper line. But in that time period when Saraswati Thakur came, that was very hidden, and the real saintly persons, they were hiding away. Because actually, a real saint has no desire to promote themselves, so there were a few like genuine, saintly Vaishnavas, Gorki Shordas Babaji, Vamsi Das Babaji are a few that come to mind, but their natures were very reclusive, and they didn't like to take disciples, they didn't want followers or fame, they avoided it, rather than promoting themselves, they had the opposite approach. So for someone who was really looking for the real path, it was like they're looking at a jungle. It was impossible. I think I lost my thread there. There was something in particular I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was going to say, there were also persons who made a business out of the whole thing. There were, persons who would emphasize bodily blood connection. So for example, these lineages, they still continue today, and you have the lineage of Nityananda, the lineage of Advaita, and they have this emphasis on bloodline, which has nothing to do with pure devotion, because bhakti devotion has nothing to do with this physical world. So one's birth, status, blood connection, that does not guarantee bhakti, not at all. But there were also, and there still are in India today, lineages who they make that a big focal point. They worship persons on the basis of their birth and their bloodline. So there were so many, I'm just painting a rough picture here, to give some idea. So it was a real jungle. and so as I said, someone who was like sincerely seeking the real path, they would be completely bewildered. And so it was actually Srila Saraswati Thakur's father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who started the cleansing process. He kind of started the foundation. He started to build the foundation. He set the building blocks. His father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had a very high position in the British government, which would have been something very impressive for a Bengali man, at that time, if we just look at it from a material perspective. So he was very well situated to have a respectable audience. He had a good platform to speak, and to give, to really represent the dignity of the real message of and principles of Mahaprabhu. So, within the existing society, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he started to like bring about a renaissance. But he realized that for this to really take off, like as a movement and as a progressive, a progressive practice that someone could take up and move forward with, he realized he wasn't the right person for that. He needed someone who was going to act as a revolutionary. And so he prayed to the Lord, please, you send somebody, send one of your own person, send someone of your own to really bring about this renaissance in the line of Lord Caitanya Dev. And so Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he appeared in response to that. And he, the thread, he picked up the thread from what his father had started, and he created this grand movement all over India. So just to give some idea of like the scope of what he was trying to do. There was one occasion, he became, he was actually Saraswati Thakur. He was already, because he was the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he already had some prestige, we can say, within society. But then as a result of his grand movement, he met with many dignitaries, politicians and British government figures within India. But there was one occasion when he met with one, what was his name? Madan Mohan Molavia, something like that. He was some type of big figure within India. I think some type of government figure, I think. But he was very impressed to see the movement of Saraswati Thakur as it was spreading throughout India. And so on one occasion he mentioned to him, I think that every town should have a center of yours. Every town should have one of your centers. And Saraswati Thakur, he responded, "What? You think that's what I'm trying to do?" No, that's not enough. I want to make a temple in everybody's heart. That's really what I'm trying to do. I want to make a temple within the heart of every living soul. That was the scope of his vision. And there was another time when he talked about making a daily newsletter. He had a monthly publication, and he had a weekly publication also, I believe. And then at one point he started talking about a daily, and I think he did run it for some time, the Nadia Prakash, I think it was called. So he started talking about that, and for some people this seems impossible. This seemed ludicrous, and so somebody made some comment about that, like how much is there to say? Like how can we how can we have so much to say that every day we're going to be publishing fresh news? And Saraswati Thakur, he responded. He said, I've heard in America there are even newspapers that are published every hour. There are newspapers being published every hour. We are coming with the news of Vaikuntha. One meaning of Vaikuntha is without any limitation, no limit. So he said, the news of Vaikuntha, it can, one drop of the news of Vaikuntha, it can flood this whole world. There's so much to say. There's an infinite degrees of news. There's so much news, In Bhagavad Gita, there's that famous verse, Yanisha Sarvabhutanam Tasyam Jagarti Bhutani, saying that for one who is awake in the world of the soul, this world is like darkness. They are awake in that higher world, and they are asleep to this lower world of the senses, and vice versa. For the embodied soul, the conditioned soul, they are very much awake in this lower world of the senses, and that higher world is like darkness. It is like night, So we can say something like that, because we're not seeing everything going on there. We're awake in this lower plane, so we may scratch our heads and say, how much is there to say? But for someone who's awake in that world, there's this infinite flood of news and fresh realization, fresh updates, fresh downloads. There was one, and we've heard that the disciples of Saraswati Thakur, they made this comment about like the presentation of Saraswati Thakur. It was so fresh. It was like, regularly they would have to wipe the whiteboard, like start over. What is Krishna consciousness? And there was one comment that Srila Sridhar Maharaj made, and only Srila Sridhar Maharaj can say these kinds of, some of the things he says, it's like, whoa, can I really say that? But he can say it, I can't say it. But one of the things that, and it shows you also like kind of the radical nature of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. One of the things that he said on this topic is he said, what I liked about my Guru Maharaj is that he wasn't just vomiting. He wasn't just vomiting what he'd already heard, but he was always giving something fresh and new. He wasn't vomiting, you know, what he'd heard. And well, then it makes you think, whoa, what is my presentation of Krishna consciousness? Am I actually, you know, able to say anything? Or is this just like, you know, this is one type of aparad. I'm just vomiting what I stored in one cavity of my brain. But he was always giving, you know, something living and fresh and vital. There was one talk that he gave once where he said he was giving some public discourse, Srila Saraswati Thakur, and in the course of his lecture, he was you know, sometimes speaking Bengali, probably principally speaking Bengali, but then he was also quoting some Sanskrit, and sometimes he would use some words in English. And so for some people it was a little difficult to follow. And so later somebody complained a little bit and said, you know, if you could, you know, speak in just one language, you know, then that would make it a lot easier to follow what you're saying, but you're moving around, you know, English, Bengali, Sanskrit, and Saraswati Thakur, he responded, actually, I'm not speaking Bengali, nor am I speaking Sanskrit, nor am I speaking English. I'm speaking Krishna consciousness. And you try to catch something, you know, as much as you can. But actually, this was one thing about Saraswati Thakur, was that his manner of presentation was very sophisticated. You know, and this all ties in with his overall you know, purpose in his presentation of Krishna consciousness. You know, because there had been so much degradation and misrepresentation, then there was a need to show the dignity, the refined nature of these teachings. And so purposefully, you know, he gave a, you know, very sophisticated presentation, to the extent that, you know, many of his top followers, they would find it difficult to follow him. You know, there are some English articles for those who are interested and who haven't seen already. There are some English articles that he's written, and they're very difficult, very, you know, very, and it's impressive just from a material point of view. It's impressive, you know, that, you know, a native Bengali speaker, you know, is able to write this level of English. You know, I remember once our Gurudev, he commented how it would be nice if somebody could translate some of the English articles of Saraswati Thakur's into Bengali for Bengalis to read, to appreciate. And then Srila Shava Prabhu, one of our devotees, he said, well, first we have to translate them into English. So he gave this very, you know, very, very sophisticated, very, very dignified presentation of Krishna consciousness. And actually we hear that our you know, that there were actually a few who could fully understand what he was saying in his lectures. And our grandfather Guru, Param Guru Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he was one of those few. And we hear that sometimes after a talk, then many of his disciples, they would come and gather around Srila Sridhar Maharaj. You know, can you explain to us, you know, what he just said? He was, you know, Srila Saraswati Thakur, he was really a very grand, very impressive figure. That there was one famous incident which illustrates this very nicely. That there was some type of conference, like a few days conference that had been organized, and Saraswati Thakur, he was invited. I don't remember if it was he was invited or if Bhakti Vinod Thakur, his father, was invited but couldn't go and sent him on his behalf. I don't remember, but in any case, he was there, and it went on, as I said, went on for a few days, and everybody had like their slot each day, and so Saraswati Thakur, he took the theme of Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and this was another opposition group that he faced. The persons who could not understand the position of Vaishnavas and who were too fixed on the material caste system and thinking that Brahmins were the highest, Brahmins were supreme. This was one group, who he had difficulty from. So for the first couple of days during this period, Saraswati Thakur, he extensively glorified Brahmins, quoting so many verses from scripture. And so in that way, all of the Brahmins present, they were very happy to hear that. And then after that, he spent the next couple of days glorifying Vaishnavas and also quoting from the Shastra, from the scripture. And there's actually a booklet I've never looked at. I'd like to read it, but I'm pretty sure there is a little booklet which kind of gives it gives some presentation of what his talks were about in that conference. But as I've understood, like the essence of what he presented is that Brahmins, they are the highest within this world. Their position within this world is supreme. So they are respected, they should be honored in that way. But the Vaishnavas, they have a position beyond this world. They have a position in the Nirguna plane. So we can honor the Brahmins, up to this point, but the Vaishnavas, they are ultimately in an even higher position. This was like, in a nutshell, this was the essence of the angle that he took in establishing the supreme position of the Vaishnavas. So this was his presentation, and in the it's mentioned in many places in the scripture that the foot dust of the Vaishnavas, the foot water of the Vaishnavas, this is something that is celebrated as very great in the scripture. And so Saraswati Thakur, and this gives us some idea of what type of presence he had. He moved his audience so much that by the end of his final discourse, the crowd went completely mad. And they all rushed upon him, like thinking he's a Vaishnava. He's telling us the glories of the Vaishnava, and we're recognizing him as a Vaishnava. And therefore we want his foot dust, we want to touch his feet, And for anyone who's like spent time in India, this is really a thing in India, even today. People, they go mad about getting, we saw that with our Gurudev, some, simple-hearted, like village type devotees, they would come upon our Gurudev. I'm sure Chinmoy Prabhu is, remember that, so, devotees would have that service of like keeping people away, So there was this mad frenzy, and this crowd like just kind of like pounced upon him. And it was so bad, there was a risk of him being crushed to death. And so one very sharp person in the crowd, they had the presence of mind to, they took a bucket of water, they stuck Saraswati Thakur's feet into the water. So they had his foot water, and then they started throwing the water out to the crowd. So this pacified everybody, and the crowd dispersed a little bit. So like this is Saraswati Thakur. What an impressive, what figure, what type of potency did he have to move a crowd like that? He could also, there are certain people, they have that like inner power where they can say things that other people can't say, and there was one occasion, there are people who can say something cutting, but with such like potency that it's actually welcomed, that it's accepted, rather than rather than being something unwelcome or disturbing, or something that is resisted, it can be something appreciated. He was that type of figure, powerful figure. There was another occasion, he gave a talk at a university in Dhaka, the capital of what is now Bangladesh, and this is at a university, and there's lots of university students and teachers, professors there, and he told them, you've all become asses, because you've become slaves of mundane knowledge. And there's a Bengali song of Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur where he says that persons who are too enamored by material knowledge, they become like asses, like donkeys, because they're carrying this load of knowledge on their head, but for no real purpose. So in this like big public talk at a university, Saraswati Thakur gave, he made this kind of statement, and everybody just took it. Everybody just accepted it. And, he faced so much opposition. Anyone who's coming, with a revolutionary movement, they have to face so much difficulty. There were people who tried to kill him. There were people who opposed him in many different ways. And that was because, on the one hand, there were people who felt threatened by him. On the lower end of the spectrum, there were people who they saw that their guru business was being threatened, because, when somebody's peddling something fake, then when they see someone coming with the same price or less with the real thing, then they know they're in trouble. So someone selling, imitation designer goods, and then someone else is coming with the real product for free, then naturally those people are threatened, So the Saraswati Thakur's movement was like that because he was really coming with this potency and with this power. People who have something real, they can generate, this type of what's the word I'm looking for? You understand what I'm saying? They can generate, they can attract people, they can inspire people. So there were people like that who felt very threatened by him, and like, he's going to put us out of business. He's exposing us. There were people like that. And then there were also persons who genuinely could not understand what he was doing because it was so radical and it was so different. Some of those things nowadays we take for granted and we can't really appreciate. But as an example, he went into Vrindavan, the holy birth land of Krishna, in a motor car, And nowadays, we won't blink twice. There's hundreds of cars running through Vrindavan. But at the time, this is like in the 1920s, this was completely unheard of. And especially for someone who's acting in the role of a spiritual leader, because what's the example that everyone's looking at? Saraswati Thakur, he broke so many stereotypes about religion. There's this stereotype, a spiritual person will go and stay in an isolated way in a cave and chant so many names of the Lord and live a life of complete renunciation and rejection of the world. There's this kind of stereotype. But Saraswati Thakur's approach was the complete opposite. He emphasized greatly the principle of yukta vairagya, which means proper renunciation, not to artificially reject anything, but rather to properly utilize everything, to see everything in connection with the service of Krishna, and to use it in that light. There was one occasion when somebody asked him, "What do you think about modern technology?" And Saraswati Thakur, rather than going down the stereotyped route, oh, we reject that, we don't need that, he said the devotees of Krishna are the only people who should be using modern technology. And it's actually true, because of course, what I mean in the sense that there's such a deep chain of, this is going off on a tangent, but it's something to think about. There's such a deep chain of exploitation in all the technology that we use. It's frightening. If we trade, if we take a phone, for example, if we trace back, where all the parts have come from, what type of exploitation, what blood has been shed to bring it to us, we don't want to think about. So there's a long and dark chain of exploitation. It's one thing if you're living like a farmer, in previous times, you live a simple life, right? So the amount of karmic reaction you can incur is only so much, right? But nowadays, if I think of what I ate today, how many different countries, how many different countries did all the things that I ate? I ate some bananas that came from Ecuador, the other side of the world. If you think about it too much, you just start to lose your mind, Bananas from Ecuador, oranges from this other country, apples from this other country, tahini from this country, et cetera, et cetera. But what does that mean? That means the chain of karma has been radically, it's reached a whole new level. It's been multiplied, hundreds and hundreds of times. The potential for karma in this modern age is frightening. So what does that mean? If we're using all these things just for our personal gratification, we become a party to that exploitation as well. So therefore, these things, they have to be used for a higher purpose. Otherwise, we're in trouble. The circumference, that's one way Srila Sridhar Maharaj talks about it, how in the modern age, the scientists, they're increasing the circumference of exploitation. That's what's been achieved. So anyhow, Saraswati Thakur, this was his principle, that everything should be used for the service of Krishna. Nothing should be rejected. This was a main, maybe the most prominent overarching theme of his preaching mission. If we had to choose one thing, we could probably say that. He also liked things to be very presentable, because there were many people who like imitated the simplicity of Vrindavan life, who imitated the simple life of the Goswamis, but in an artificial way. And so Saraswati Thakur's idea was that we're going to use all the grandeur of this world. Why am I riding into Vrindavan in a motor car? He expressed that himself, to stand for the dignity of our gurus, to stand for the dignity of this line. That was his idea. But it was, as I was saying, it was so radical that so many people, they could not understand. They thought he's bogus. When he entered Vrindavan at that time, for the first time in a motor car, we hear that all the temples of Vrindavan, they closed their doors to him, except for one temple, the Radha Raman temple. They welcomed and accepted him. But all the other temples, all the other leaders in Vrindavan, they closed their doors to him. Our Gurudev, he mentioned once how, at the time, nobody could understand what he was doing. But now everybody has to acknowledge, what he did. Why? Because the proof of the what is that expression? The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Maybe his methods didn't make sense to a lot of people, but he produced a result. That's what matters. And this is what a real revolutionary does. They're not just following a formula. They're not just following whatever has been done before, but they're seeing in a living and in a vital way what is actually necessary at this time, what is actually needed at this time in essence. That he had that vision of a real revolutionary, and he did what was needed to bring about, the needed results. Our Param Guru Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he gave a very nice example of Napoleon Bonaparte. He was this kind of radical general in his time, and so he gave the example, the Austro-Hungarian War, and so initially the French were losing, right, and the other side was winning, and then Napoleon was appointed as this new young general, and then the tide started to change, and there was this discussion on the other side. The king was inquiring, what's going on? We were winning, and now what happened? Now we're losing. What did you do wrong? What's happening? And his generals told him, well, they just appointed this new general, and he doesn't know how to fight properly. No, he's not following the rules like, what we're accustomed to. He's doing something different. But they said it like that. He doesn't know how to fight properly. Why? Because he adopted a different strategy. Normally persons would go the safe route, and they would attack the weaker portions of the army and then slowly work their ways up to the stronghold. But Napoleon took a very bold approach. He took the opposite approach, where he attacked the strongest. This was his idea. If you hit the strongest point, then everything else will topple. So this was Napoleon's approach, and he was successful. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he made this very nice comparison to the preaching approach of Srila Saraswati Thakur. He was very radical, he was very bold, he was very different. And that's why he was successful. Even though many persons criticized him and couldn't understand him, he knew what he was doing, and he was successful. And so now, in the light of, you know, how great his movement became, everybody has to acknowledge, you know, his position. And you know, this is, you know, we're talking about his movement that he directly began in India at the time, but then the waves that came after that and what his disciples established, you know, Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada traveling to America, beginning the ISKCON movement, taking Krishna consciousness all over the world. That all came from the will of Saraswati Thakur. You know, that actually that was something that was an unfulfilled desire that Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada took up and was able to fulfill. You know, Saraswati Thakur, he actually wanted to spend the last 10 years of his life in India, in America, because he considered, we've sent some preachers to Europe, you know, he literally had a map, you know. We hear when he had preachers in England, he had a map, and maybe it was just of London, and where he would put a mark, like wherever there was some talk that was held, he would put a mark there, like, you know, we've conquered this, you know, we've conquered this, you know. He had this type of, you know, scope of vision. So anyway, you know, he's considering, like, where are the most influential places in the world, and he sent some preachers to Europe, you know, principally England, London, but then he also wanted to send. He himself actually wanted to go to America, and he wanted to spend his last days there, because, you know, everyone's looking at America. And you know, this was something that he talked about so much, and we hear there was one of his disciples who had the service of plowing fields in one of the temples. We hear that he was studying English at one time. And somebody asked him at one point, you know, why are you studying English? You know, your duty is just to plow the fields. You know, what need do you have to know English? And that disciple, he responded, well, now I'm plowing fields in India, but in a few years I could be plowing fields in America. Because Prabhupada's always talking about preaching in America. So I have to get ready, you know, I have to be prepared for that. But, you know, like that's how much he talked about it, you know. So, you know, he inspired, you know, that decision that Swami Maharaj Prabhupada took, you know, at 69 years old, you know, to go to America to preach. So this is his last years, you know, 2 heart attacks on his way. I mean, it's inconceivable. But that was because of that pressure he felt within himself. My Guru Maharaj wanted this, you know, I have to fulfill this desire of my Guru Maharaj. There's so many things, you know. You know, we can talk all day about the glories about Srila Saraswati Thakur. But I didn't actually say so much about what were, like, specifically about what were some of the revolutionary things. You know, he established the sannyas ashram, you know, the wearing of you know, the establishing the order of renunciation, the sannyas order within the line of Mahaprabhu, which was not previously done. He established Brahmin initiation to non-Brahmins, you know, in consideration that Vaishnavas are higher to Brahmins. And, you know, what I mentioned this approach of utilization of everything rather than rejection, or there was more emphasis on utilization rather than renunciation. And also another important point about Saraswati Thakur is that he emphasized so much the essence of spiritual practice rather than following practices in an external way. He cut to what was the essence, what was the real purpose of these practices, and where needed, to make adjustments. Like one example, the observance of Akadashi. This is Akadashi. It's for those who don't know, it's a special day every 2 weeks or so when we fast from grains and from very sensually stimulating foods, but in particular grains. But actually, according to scripture, Akadashi is meant to be a full fast is supposed to be observed for Akadashi. There like people who follow it very strictly, they won't even take a drop of water on Akadashi. But Saraswati Thakur, his consideration was, what is the real purpose of Akadashi? Is it just to follow some rule so that you can get some personal benefit? That's not the purpose of Akadashi. The real purpose of Akadashi is to please Krishna, to try to give more of one's energy to Krishna. So he considered, well, if we're doing a complete fast, we're going to be lying in bed all day, at least most of us. We won't be able to do very much. So what's the point? Or at least we won't be able to fulfill that need of supplying more energy to Krishna. And so he instituted a half-day fast instead. And then the second half of the day, one will just, take roots and fruits like that, take a more simple foodstuffs. There was another occasion on Janmashtami day. Janmashtami is the birthday of Krishna. And normally on that day, we fast until midnight, up until the time of Krishna's appearance. But he had one disciple he needed to send. I think he was sending him to Vrindavan, so like the other side of India. He had to take a very long train journey for some particular necessity. And he instructed the cook to prepare rice for, he instructed the cook to prepare rice for that devotee who had to make this long journey. And the cook was shocked, because what to speak of rice, normally on the day of Janmashtami, we won't take any food, and we won't even take non-grain food like we do on Akadashi. It's a full fast normally. So to take rice, that's something very it's unheard of. And so the cook he said, today's Janmashtami, and Saraswati said, yes, I know that, But his consideration was he has to take this long journey for a service necessity. And that's more important than, ticking that box. Yes, I fasted, but to be able to render the required service and to do what's necessary to be fit for that, that's more important. Another nice example our Gurudev liked. There was one occasion when there was a preaching party. There were so many like groups who would travel throughout India, spreading the good word. And on one occasion, there was one particular group, maybe it was around the Kashmir area. They were preaching. and they didn't have any acquaintances in the area, and so they had to stay in some rented accommodation, and they had to eat, at whatever little restaurant was there. And so when they first arrived, they went to eat in one place, and but the food from a Vedic perspective was not completely pure, because there were onions in the food. And for us living in the West, that's not such a surprising thing, but for someone who's following the the Vedic regulations, onions, garlic, mushrooms, these are all like a big no. So this was something that they observed strictly. But this food, it had some onions in it. And so they're sitting around the table there, and they've received this food. There's some vegetable preparation, sabji, and somebody noticed the onions and made a comment. Oh, how can we eat this? There's onions here. We can't eat this. And then Goswami Maharaj, Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj, who was one of the very prominent leading followers of Saraswati Thakur, he told him, "You're seeing onions, I'm seeing Mahaprasad, the grace of the Lord. I'm seeing the Lord's grace, And this was the spirit of Saraswati. This really wonderfully illustrates the spirit of Saraswati Thakur. Goswami Maharaj is considering, we're here, we have nothing else to eat. The Lord has provided this to us, and we will happily accept it. Maybe from a material point of view, it's not completely pure, but I'm considering the Lord has given it to us, and therefore from a spiritual point of view, it is pure, it is perfect. It is the Lord's own prasad, his mercy." So this was, this was the spirit of Saraswati Thakur, and he instilled that within his disciples. He put so much emphasis on the essence, following the essence of what spiritual life is about, rather than following in a formulaic external way. Well, maybe I'll stop there. We're fortunate we can try to remember something of the divine glories of Srila Saraswati Thakur. And as I said at the beginning, if we consider, what he did, what his life's work was, we are eternally indebted to him. And if we could dedicate our whole lives, just trying to pay back that debt, we wouldn't be able to pay it back, but it would be a life, worth living. It would be a well-lived life, but, nothing we can do, can equal, what he did for us. We are so greatly indebted. And I have to stop somewhere, but everything, this is something our Gurudev mentioned, in terms of how we practice Krishna consciousness here and now. We don't look past Saraswati Thakur, because if we look throughout history, there are different ways in which the practice of bhakti has been practiced. There are, in the realm of Vaishnavism, in the realm of Krishna Bhakti, in the realm of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the followers of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, there are so many different lines of practice. There are many different routes you can go. And they're not wrong. They're all right, But Gurudev commented, we don't look past Saraswati Thakur, in this modern age. He has laid down the stepping stones. He's laid down the path for us, and we don't look past him in terms of how we are applying the principles of devotion, and Krishna consciousness in this day and age. And the mantras that we chant, the way we run our temples, the clothes that we wear, it's all been like laid down by Saraswati Thakur. So he's such a great, such an important figure for us. Okay, well, I better stop there. We want to say hello to everybody. Our Dandavat pranams, everyone. Madhavi Didi's here. I think that must be Madhavi Didi in Colombia.
Didi, we have to give our special blessings to Rukmini Devi Dasi, who's going to do a live birth on our Zoom meeting.
Oh, really? Is she in? Oh, wow. Are you actually like about to give birth?
No. No, but I'm at the hospital because
You're at the
have to
hospital. Wow.
Yeah. They have to give me an iron infusion, but I'm not giving birth right now. But
Wow.
soon.
Wow, this is such a privilege. We can be present.
It's so nice to hear you, even here. It's so nice.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. My goodness. And so how much time, would you have an estimated time or?
I have only around 4 to 6 weeks to have this baby.
But you're in hospital now.
Yes, they have to give me an iron infusion because my blood levels are not very high.
I see.
So I had to come today and be here for at least 6 to 8 hours. So I don't want to miss the class.
Oh, I see. Wow, that's so cool. We have people tuning in from all over. Wow, well that's so cool that you're still tuning in, and that's really inspirational.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have also Nanga Krishna Prabhu joining from Tijuana. Really happy to have you with us, Prabhu. And George, Dandavat and Nanga Krishna Prabhu. And I see a George. That's not Jai Balai Prabhu, is it?
Same name, Jorge, but I don't know. I don't think it is him, but maybe.
Yeah. Huh. Not sure who that is. Chintamani Didi, of course, Jayadev Prabhu, Madhavi. Parvati is joining us again. Very happy to have you with us. Suvasini Didi from Ireland. Dandavat pranams.
Dandavat Didi.
Dandavat. Madhavi, Dandavat. So happy to have you with us. Dandavat.
How are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm happy to see you. Ready
thank you. Me too. See you and hear you.
I spend a lot of time with Madhavi in Navadvip, in our main temple in India, and she did so much beautiful.
3 times, huh? 4 times, no?
Yes. Very nice. Very good to see you.
Thank you, Didi. Me too.
We have a comment from Chintamani. Jorge is a friend in Texas. Okay, cool. Great to have you with us from Texas. And Rukmini, Didi, of course, with her unborn. Her unborn is with us as well. Seva Rupa Didi in South Africa. We have an international, and our friend in Sweden, he was on emergency duty at the hospital, so he's probably had to go. All right, well, does anyone want to add anything? Suvasini Didi, you want to add anything?
No, Didi, that was wonderful. Very beautiful to hear your presentation. Yeah, beautiful.
Anyone, or should we close there? Chinmoy Prabhu, you want to say anything?
Devi, thank you very much. Beautiful glorification of Srila Saraswati Thakur. We could do this every day and not find the end of his glory. So really appreciate it that you can bring that to us.
My good fortune to have such good friends. Chintamani or Jayadev, you want to say anything? You're always bringing such nice people to our group. We're so indebted to you, to you both for that.
Dandavad, nice to see you, Didi.
Where are you two now?
Complex setup,
we
don't do a loop. It's a long story, but we appreciate you so much. We can't do the back and forth audio.
We have the video on the phone, which has no audio, and then we have you on the big screen on the TV, and then we have to mute, so we can't hear you when we say hi. So Dandavats, we'll go back on mute here.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll stop there. I'd love to have Ananga Krishna say something. He's a really nice speaker, but I think he's shy to speak in English, so I won't pressure him. Okay. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Jai Srila Gurudev ki jai, Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Vishakha Devi Dasi ki.
Jai, jai.